First question, why are people selling businesses? It's often the question we always ask every client, why are you selling? Because it's an important factor of selling a business. Well, often, there's elements of retirement or they're having, conflicts with their partners. I've had people call me and say, I had a health scare or a health condition that led me to want to sell my business. A lot of our clients, probably the majority, say they're just burned out, right? They've reached a peak and they're just tired and want to do something else. They may look for other jobs, but it's not what they're doing now. Maybe they've hit a plateau and they realize that the next owner can get past it, but they can't, right? Or, something in their life has changed where they have some calling to do something new in their lives, right? And then finally, there is, as my partner Corby noted, there's the 7-year slump is a real thing, right? That after about 7 years of owning a business, a lot of people just say, I got to do something else, which is sort of a mixture of all these reasons. There is this myth out there that there's a buyer for every single business. You list a business for sale and somebody's going to come and buy it. The truth is, and this, I've seen anything from 19 to 25%, but the truth is the majority of businesses that somebody wants to sell, they just can't find somebody to buy them. So, something when you're counseling your clients and they say, I want to sell, they have to understand that that's a difficult process. And it's not just going to be a given that it's going to be done. And there's thousands of people waiting to buy their business. So what makes a good business, what makes it saleable? Well, some of these are going to be things that are obvious to this crowd. You all consult to small businesses, but sometimes it's worth stating some of the obvious. Having great books. When we look at a multiplier of earnings, I'll either add to that multiplier or subtract from it because I'll say to the client, either you have great, clean, consistent books, or, your books are garbage. And there's a lot more companies out there that you'll see that have garbage books than you think, where, I actually advised somebody the other day, one, I'm not selling your business, and two, find a new CPA, right? We want to see historical revenues and profit growth every year, obviously. One of the biggest is to see these growth opportunities. The buyer wants to have the vision of growth. You don't want to have too much customer concentration. You want to have a good management team in place, good procedures, an assignable lease, right? Landlords can kill deals. You want to make sure that there's a period where the seller is going to stay on at least for a month, for instance, to help the buyer get their footing. And this last point is really important to understand. A lot of people selling businesses will sit there and go, but if you think what I could be doing, or if you project my last month out for the next 5 years, like this business is worth a ton. And the truth is that buyers buy, right, based on that future vision. They say, I see the future and how I can build this business something tremendous, but I'm only going to pay on historical cash flow. Right? I'm not paying a dime over what my historical cash flow is projecting. So yes, it's sort of like you buy a shirt, for instance, because you say, oh, I could see myself going out and presenting in this lovely shirt, but you're not paying a dime over what the market should pay for that shirt. And for business, you're paying on those historical cash flows. How do we calculate what a business is worth? It's, a lot of people think we're wizards behind the curtain, like in the Wizard of Oz, right? And the truth is, it's just math, and it's a lot of digging into financials. It starts with a process we call recasting in business brokerage world. I don't know if everybody's familiar with that term or not, but it's taking what is this profit to the owner of the business? That's not the line on their corporate S tax return that says, oh, you made $50,000. But it's like, well, what about the $50,000 you paid yourself in salary? That benefited you. So now we're at $100,000. And oh, you pay your kid, but your kid doesn't work in the business at all. You just sort of did that to give your kid some money, and that was $20,000. Well, that's benefiting your family. And you paid for your retirement funds for yourself, and you paid for, the payroll taxes for yourself, and so on and so forth, your healthcare. And we add up all those various pieces. We also add in things like one-time events. Oh, I had a lawyer I had to pay last year for a lawsuit that got settled or whatever, right? I'm not going to have that again. You can add those back in. But it's often a debate. A lot of buyers who hear about add backs want to add back everything, right? I had a guy, saying, I want to add back my home. I was like, well, no, that's not an add back, right? So we get to a point where we get that earnings to the owner. We develop a multiple base, much like in the housing market. What are the comparables? Just like, if you bought a house, you want to say, well, what does the other 5-bedroom house on the street sell for? We say, well, what are other businesses that are in your industry of your size selling for? Right. And actually, they've been consistent over decades, those multiples. But, then the question is, given these two factors, how do we inch up a price or lower price, as I said? And some of that are things like how consistent your revenues have been, how easily can this business be transferred, how good is your brand, right? How hard is it for competitors to come in, right? Those factors here will change because the multiples are a range. It doesn't say when you look at this comparable, oh, it is 2.0. It's somewhere at 1.6, it's somewhere at 3.0, right? You can take the arithmetic mean, but the right thing to do is consider these factors to say, where are we on that scale for a business? And finally, obviously, the stuff you have, right? If I have $1 million of equipment, that has to be factored in. And there are specific industries where inventory or assets should be added to the calculation. So for instance, I'm selling a chain of grocery stores right now. And in the grocery world, you value on this cash flow, but then you add in the inventory of what that grocery store is holding, because that's going to transfer to the workers. So one of the things I want to make sure that you as advisors tell all of your clients is that, first of all, you want to plan out your sale 3 to 5 years in advance if you can. And everybody you speak to has to understand that vision of don't decide to sell your business at the time you're ready to sell your business. Think about it years in advance. And what you want to advise them is to start forming the right team, right? So they should find a good transaction attorney they're going to work with, not, somebody who does divorces, not somebody who is even an estate planner, but somebody who does M&A, right? And there are experts in that space. Find a good accountant, make sure that your books look nice and clean. Talk to your financial planner ahead of time, right, about that you're wanting to sell so that they can start planning out your investments appropriately. Talk to your estate planner to make sure that it's all going to transfer to your kids the way you want it to, or your heirs. And obviously, we like to work with folks years in advance, even though we don't make any money from that because we're success-based. But I want to be able to start telling them what they're worth now and some of the things I'm talking about now about how they can make themselves worth more later. I wrote in the headline that you can't quite read here, death and taxes, maybe, right? Because the taxes part, there are ways to avoid taxes in a business sale. Some of it is, the timing or paying in installments. A good financial planner, for instance, can do some financial investment strategies years in advance to do some capital gain loss harvesting, for instance, so that when you get the capital gain impact of the sale of your business, you can offset it from the last 3 or 4 years that you've been harvesting losses, as an example. There's various real estate strategies. You probably all have heard of 1031 exchange. If you hadn't, Corby can tell you all about that, later on. Assets versus goodwill. One is for the seller, taxed at a regular tax rate. The assets, goodwill, taxed at a corporate capital gains rate. So you want to, try to get that, and that's negotiable. It's not set in stone that, well, assets are worth this. It's all based on a document that you submit to the IRS, and it's negotiated. Seller financing is often done where the person selling the business says, well, I'll loan you the money to buy my business. You'll pay me over time. And there's some tax advantages because you get to defer those taxes for the years out that you're getting that. You're going to get that at an interest rate also. ESOPs have a whole different tax strategy. It's called a 1042 exchange, right? It's got to be pretty big companies, but if we're talking about a company that maybe makes $5 or $10 million of profits, ESOPs might be a great way to avoid taxes. And also, whether they're an S Corp or C Corp has a lot of variability in the tax impact. So understanding that is important. So, if most of your clients are not going to be ready to sell right now, they're not calling me tomorrow and saying, hey, I heard from this SCORE advisor that I have that you're a great business broker, help me sell my business. This is something, as I said, years out. So what do you do in the meantime? I'm not going to read this whole list. I mean, you all can read, but, keeping good books, as I said, documenting your processes, building a good team around you, making sure that whether it's a store or you have equipment, that things are in good shape. And when a buyer were to walk in, they see everything looking, well maintained, fresh, equipped. right? Making sure you have good reputations, right? And there is an element of understanding the tax implication where about 2 years before you sell, you want to flip the script of thinking about how do I pay as little taxes as I can to saying, anything that might be questionable about some of those add backs, maybe I should not take that as an expense of my taxes, actually pay the taxes because I'm going to get a multiple of like 2 to 3 times that at the end versus 30% of that dollar, right, that I paid in taxes. So, and what I often say is a lot of folks, they'll want to sell after they started slowing down. You saw revenues going down and down and down, or even when they start the process with us, that they start letting their foot off the gas pedal. And that's the worst thing to do because you still have due diligence for many months. And if the buyer sat there and said, well, during the 6 months that we figured this out to buy your business, you've gone from, $500,000 of revenue down to 100,000 because you stopped because you thought we're done. They'll walk even day before the close. So you got to keep your foot on the gas pedal right till the very end. Let's turn our table to the buyers. I don't know how much you'll ever deal with buyers, but let's talk about buyers. Why would you buy a business? Well, sometimes a great way to, grow a business or as an investment platform, it's going to have a much better return often than the stock market does on your investment. You get an immediate cash flow versus if you try to start a business from day one, you open your doors as an entrepreneur, you don't have customers. I buy a business, I have 1,000 customers day one. Right. So it's a great way to immediately have cash flow. There's ways to buy the business through SBA that you can, have very little down and leverage, right? The purchase, so 10% will get you the ability to buy a business. $100,000 of buying a $1 million business. It's going to appreciate over that time. If you grow your business, obviously you buy the business for $1 million and then you sell it for $3 million and it earned you money all the years that you owned it. There's also tax benefits, right? There's the general just joy of being your own boss. There's a lifestyle change that is built into that, right? And as I said, you get existing staff, existing customers. It's like Just Add Water with those old toys we used to have, right? You put the drop of water and boom, I have a business today, right? It's also a great way for existing businesses to grow. I used to be the CEO of a medical business. And I said to the owners, which was my sister, said, we're never starting from scratch again. You spend $300,000 and you open doors and there were no customers. I got the same thing for $100,000 that I bought from somebody, and we had X-ray equipment and chairs and everything that just came with the business. It's a great way to grow through acquisition. So, buyers should prepare by knowing the market, getting pre-qualified with lenders, building relationships with us brokers so they can hear about deals before they go to the market, knowing the math, right? We were talking with the gentleman back here about understanding some of the metrics of how a business is valued, so that you're getting a fair price and somebody's not taking advantage of you. Getting your ducks in a row so that when you find the business, you're ready to go. You've got all your tax returns together, your resume, your plan, etc. Right? And it's key to stand out from a crowd. I have a client right now that I'm selling. It's a commercial cleaning business. We got 230 signed NDAs already. We're not even done yet, so it might be higher. I've spoken to over 80 buyers. Each one thinks like, well, you're going to pick me because I want to buy your business. I said, no, I've spoken to 80 of you. We're going to have a bidding war here, right? So why would my clients and I pick you from the crowd, right? Well, some of it is, don't just tell me that you want to buy this business because it met your financial metrics, what a lot of people call a buy box, right? I want to see passion about why this is a business that you are excited about, right? Some genuine enthusiasm or industry experience that you might have, right? Be clear about how you're paying for it, right? I get to pick. I'm not going to go to somebody who's like, well, find somebody. No, I want to see some pre-qualification letters, right? Where I want to see a proof of funds. Have that all ready, right? And have a clear vision. When I ask all of these 80 people that I've spoken to in this example, so, what excites you about this business and how do you plan to grow it? You better have a good answer. Right? Because I'm picking among 80 people I've spoken to. Not every business for sale is worth buying, right? As I said, you want to see that there's either synergy with your existing business or you see a clear vision of how I can grow by, geographic expansion or product expansion or, hitting new customer markets or whatever it may be, right? Make sure that the business isn't the person, Bob's, handyman repair, if Bob is the only person and he has his clients because everybody loves Bob, well, when Bob's gone and Susie wants to change it to Susie's handyman repair, people are going to be, oh, well, you're not Bob, right? And all of a sudden you lost all your customers. Find sellers that you can work with. If you feel like something feels really wrong about a transaction as a buyer, and that seller just feels like they're trying to, play a fast one on you, walk. There's going to be another business that's better. Make sure, business has good bones. There may be, some problems, but problems sometimes are good, right? A client of mine right now, for instance, they don't do any marketing. And you say, well, why would I want a company that doesn't do any marketing? Because you can buy it and do marketing and grow the business, right? So make sure they have good, good team in place that are, folks that aren't turning over. You don't want to see a business that has turnover where they're replacing staff every year at 100% turnover or something like that. As I said, make sure that the math works, right? When you do the math, that it seems like the calculus works, you're going to get a bank to finance it, things like that. And in the end, you just have to feel in your gut that I'm, bouncing out of my skin to own this business. This is the right thing for me. Negotiation, I'll talk about really quickly. As I said, you can negotiate assets versus goodwill. There's different things you can do, asking for a seller to, provide a note. I have a business right now that the seller's very desperate to sell. So we're doing a 50% seller note, right, on the business. It's a $300,000 business, 150. He's loaning the money to get it sold. You can do things like earnouts if you're not using the SBA. If you are, there's other ways to play around it. Earnouts are, if everybody familiar with earnouts, I hope, but if you're not, it's, the business does well in the future years, you get as the seller a bonus in the years down the road. Discuss how long you get a transition period. If there's equity that's being left on the table, so the seller still owns a piece of the business going forward. Right. And knowing some of the timing, we had a business that we sold this year on January 2nd. And because the buyer was willing to push it out from December, we gave them a little bonus in some of their, adjustments to price and things like that, because there's a big financial advantage to my clients. So there's a negotiation point about the timing of the sale. A little bit about us, just as you had said, we could pitch ourselves for about 60 seconds. I mentioned that, the industry average is about 19%. We sell pretty much every business that we list. We are the most accredited brokerage from the IBBA, which is the International Business Broker Association, in the entire state. We have a team approach, as I even noted with my team members in the room, right? I have my consulting growth strategy experience. Sandacon's an AI expert. Corby is a former CPA and real estate expert. We all have various things that we bring to the table together. We say that our, motto is ethics above all, because there's a lot of shadiness in the business broker world where a lot of brokers will try to pull the wool over people's eyes. We're like, no, that's not us. We've all owned and sold businesses ourselves, right? As I said, I used to be the CEO of a medical business. And we come with a lot more just corporate experience, much like many of the people in this room, as far as our professionalism and, our client satisfaction and just the results that we get, which is why we're so amazed that we have about 70 reviews on the web. They are all 5 stars, and they are not, they're not our friends and neighbors. They're actually people that work with